confidence? It all starts with the tools at your fingertips. CMI creates workplaces full of inspiring leaders. With its on-demand resources, network of mentors, and industry-leading accreditations. Search CMI Confidence today.
This session is recorded and will be available on the CMI website and YouTube channel. Join the conversation by using the live chat box for your questions and comments. We'll answer as many as we can during the Q&A.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Decision Making to Drive Business and Define Careers digital event. My name is Mary Bolawale, and I am an events coordinator at CMI. Don't forget to join the conversation by using the live chat box, and we'll answer as many questions as we can during the Q&A. I will now hand over to Delroy, Beverley, and Carl Andrew to begin today's event.
Thank you, Mary. And good evening and welcome everybody, and a really warm welcome to everybody. It is my privilege to share the stage with Delroy, my dear friend, this evening, in service for you all to talk through our amazing careers thus far. Tonight, between myself and Delroy, we'll take you through our own journeys. We'll start with an introduction to ourselves and our backstories, who we are. Then we'll take you through our early career and then through to any big defining moments and then the future and what's next. So a warm welcome to everybody. So my name is Carl Andrew. I was, my backstory, I was born in the late 60s. I'm a child of the 1980s. My informative years were all in the 1980s. So I came from a working class background. My father worked on the Hull docks in East Yorkshire, and my mum was a school cleaner. And I had a lovely childhood. My school days were probably the best days I remember. I was very fortunate. I went to my local comprehensive school. And back then in the 80s, you just went to your local comprehensive school. And I was very lucky because I spent a lot of time with individuals that were from a different class, a middle class. We were definitely working class back then. And I was one of the fortunate ones because that influence, I was pulled up by being in that environment. I benefited from being with peers and contemporaries that came from a different background, and for some reason I was just open to that. So I accomplished well at school. I also joined a local running club, and that's where I first learnt the rules of self-discipline and the values of determination. I remember vividly every time we used to train, there was a footbridge, and we used to do 10 reps up the steps, down the slopes, up the steps, down the slopes. And that happened over a period of 3 years. And that really, really instilled in me the art of discipline and doing the small things well over and over and over again. And from that became the values that embedded in my character became self-discipline, courage, and particularly a growth mindset. So just before I hand over to Delroy to introduce himself, those non-negotiables I've carried on through the rest of my life and have become central to who I am today. So my story definitely does start way, way back in the 1980s. Delroy, over to you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Carl. And you mentioned that the privilege about sharing the platform with you this evening. It's a great honor and a privilege for me, not just to share it with you, but we've had nearly 900 people sign up for this evening's event. So to all of those who are listening online, it is a real pleasure to have you with us this evening. Unlike Carl, who's by the sounds of his introduction, has had a wonderful introduction to life. I'm second generation Jamaican. So, my story is very different. And actually, it's that story that defines who I am. My parents were just working class, and that is the principle that ran through the family. We were and are practicing Christians. Church was a real anchor for the family, and I remember, being at a time in school where people of color were made to feel that they were different for lots of reasons. I come from a generation where race and the issue of racism was prevalent, really, really prevalent. So my childhood memories are very positive. I had a paper round, I had a milk round. But what really made me in that regard was to observe my parents, just observe the challenges that they had to go through day in, day out, week in, week out. And what that really reinforced in me is a desire to do something, to break that generational link in terms of saying, we can do better than this. And that leads into the second part of this evening in terms of one's early career. And, we talk about understanding the world. And, again, it goes back to the heading of this evening, driving business and defining careers. Understanding the world is a very complex thing. There's no one thing that affects me that affects maybe yourself or anyone that's listening on the call today. But what I knew at the time, and even today in 2023, the world is changing. It is evolving. What affected me in the 70s won't affect my children now, albeit in a slightly different way. And one of the things that taught me quite early on in my life, actually, was the importance of setting goals, life goals and career goals, really, really important. And recognizing that it's okay to fail. But I would rather fail with a plan than fail with no plan at all. Because we talk about making mistakes and learning. I think life is about mistakes. What is the point of not making mistakes in your life, whether that's in your career or whether that's in your personal life? The important thing to do once you've made those mistakes is to learn from them. And I've been around some wonderful people who have influenced me. And first and foremost, I have to talk about those who have come before me. So my mother, my father, my grandparents, who took the decision to send my parents to this country as part of the Windrush generation, to all of the great leaders that I've worked with over the last 35 years. I've learned something from them, good, bad, and indifferent. But more importantly, I've been very much influenced by myself, because I think it's the failures that have defined who I am, not the successes. So before we go on to the big moments and defining moments, Carl, I'm going to just ask you to maybe walk through your early career and share that with those that are listening this evening.
Indeed. Thank you, Delroy. Well, my early career was full of mistakes. So I did the standard thing. I sat my A-levels, went to university, and came out of university. And my only job previous to that was, like you, Delroy, I had a paper round. And there I was, and I managed to secure a training accountancy scheme with Comet, the former electrical retailer. Now, bear in mind, this was in the early 90s, and just as that, my timing was perfect, because just as I joined, the UK went into a very deep recession. For example, the current VAT rate was 15%, that moved to 17.5%. And within a year and a half, I was made redundant. And then I had to go through that process of self-reflection. At that point, I thought it was me incorrectly, that I'd lost the job, but I was made redundant, that I'd influenced that. I then took on several other jobs and was made redundant twice. And that built a resilience. And it's something that I've come to to term as persist and resist. And it's all to do with self-control and self-mastery. And you touched on it earlier, Delroy, in terms of self-development. This was the start of my self-development, the realization that you're absolutely right, the world is complex. And even back in the 90s through the 2000s, even now and beyond, I believe that change is endemic. It's here to stay. And I've got a sort of shortened sort of synonym for it, which is VUCA, which is volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And that's what I learned about the world, and I'm still learning. And I think that is true today and will always be. We will always be in change. And there's a quote from the late Queen Elizabeth II, who said, "If things are going to stay the same, then things are going to have to change." And I think that sums up my early career. That's what I learned, that actually change is everywhere. And the best way to deal with change is to learn, and to learn from people that have been through that change. And that's why I read a lot, and I read from about people who've been successful, who have successfully transitioned through change. And I think it's something that you have to accept, the art of change, reframing, and the art of looking at things from different viewpoints, and grasping opportunities and looking at opportunities. For example, if you are in the unfortunate position of being made redundant, take that opportunity as a clean sheet to reassess where you are, to look at things that you may have done wrong, but always be experimenting. And you're absolutely right there, Roy. Life is about making mistakes, because if you're not making mistakes, you're not pushing your boundaries and you're not learning. So those are the takeaways from my early career. But as I moved from my early career into the moments that have really defined me and my career, and I turn these, and we've turned this section big defining moments. For me, the one of the biggest defining moments was finding my faith. Having been made redundant from Comet back in 1992, I found my faith, and I went to my local Methodist church. Now, actually, I got more than I bargained for, because I met and fell in love and married the organist's daughter. So for me, that, in a personal sense, was one of the almost defining moments ever. And it's quite interesting, because we talk about decision making, and one of the questions I've been asked previously is, what is your best decision? And my best decision was getting married. And actually, when you compare a personal decision like getting married to a business decision, getting married, it's a very, very gut, it's intuition. Whereas business decisions, we tend to perhaps, and this is in my opinion, sometimes overanalyze, and sometimes we ignore the intuition side of your personality. And I think both are important. So for me, becoming married, getting married, and marrying my best friend has been my defining moment. And she has supported me. Carolyn, my wife, has supported me all the way through my career. From that, we got married in 1996. We just celebrated our 27th wedding anniversary. Still living married life. So being married to Carolyn, being married, gave me a great platform and a support to push myself forward. Now, my career took a different turn, a turn that I never expected, because those moments of being made redundant led me into the field of interim management. and I fell into it. It wasn't by design, and this goes back to what Delroy was talking about experimenting, about making mistakes. That actually mistakes lead to opportunities, and the opportunity that I took was to follow a path into interim management, which I've been successfully navigating for the past 15 years. But it wasn't until, again, another life-defining moment, which was the death of my father, but latterly the passing of my mum, who died of Alzheimer's. And that was a point where there's a point that's reached that you think, this is it, this is the moment that if I'm going to do something else, that this is it. And in memory of my parents, I had a yearning to do something different. And that yearning was to set up my own consultancy business, which I've now just done over the last sort of year to year and a half. And again, it's remarkable what opportunities a sad and challenging event can bring. And so you always have to have and be aware in any circumstances that actually there can be moments of real opportunities to take advantage of. So my final thoughts on these big defining moments is that they will come. We will all have these defining moments. It's just how we reframe them and look at them and see the opportunity to actually grow as an individual, both personally and your career. Delroy, over to you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Carl, and a really inspiring set of examples there. I wonder, one of the things, just going back to one's early career, I grew up at a time where, we didn't have a lot, and that's where the discipline for me of getting up at 3 o'clock, 3:30 in the morning, going out and delivering milk before I went to school, really ingrained in me the discipline of work and work ethic. And I think I often say to people that when you apply that in your career, or certainly in business, it's that ingrained determination to make something of yourself, and certainly the organization you work for, that really drives you on. I come from, as I've mentioned, a Jamaican, second generation Jamaican family. Faith is massively important. My best friend, I met through the church. Some of my lifelong friends are individuals that I've met through church. And I think the big moment came for me in 1998. One of the local governments within the region was piloting actually, a pioneering executive leadership program where they were looking for 7 individuals from a Black and Asian minority background. You had to have a first degree in order to get onto the program, etc., etc. And through that program, so it was 3 years, seconded to working alongside chief exec, the chief constable at the time of West Yorkshire Police, and then the chief executive of a major global charity. And that was the real defining moment for me, because through that program, I met an individual, and we're talking over 20 years ago, that is still in my life to this day, that has guided me through my career, that has guided me through some quite challenging things that I've experienced away from work and in work. And I think the point that I'm making there to those who are listening online, you cannot do this on your own. You need someone who's got your best interest inside and outside the workplace. And I have found that that spirit of presence has been something that's been really, really helpful for me. And actually, to the point now that I try and pay that back by mentoring, coaching, and guiding the next generation. I have two wonderful sons that I'm incredibly proud of, both who have done incredibly well in their careers. And I think, you know, where that really resonates for me in terms of those big defining moments is the importance of passing the baton on and passing the baton on to the next generation. And it's the same when you're in an organization. There becomes a natural point where you've taken that business or that organization as far as you can. And there's a skill and an importance in knowing when you need to hand that across to someone else. It's like the work that I've done for the last 6-7 years for the CMI, chairing the North East Yorkshire and Humberside board, meeting some fantastic people in terms of the volunteer members who make up the board, but importantly, the wider CMI family. Single-handedly, the CMI have been a rocket launcher for my career. And it's no coincidence in my mind that I was recognised this year with a doctorate from the University of Warwick, and the CMI definitely played its part in that. One of the things that I think is important to get across in this conversation this evening is the importance of pushing yourself and sometimes taking yourself outside of your comfort zone. Decision making and making decisions are two different things. And I made a decision in 2016 at the time that I was going to work in the Southeast for a period of time, because I knew that if I wanted to really accelerate my executive career, I knew I had to have London on my CV. And every week for over 2 years, I commuted to London, stayed Monday to Thursday, and drove back every week. And not many people would do that. And the point that I'm making there is you've got to be willing to take risks. You've got to be willing to take risks in order to get rewards. Now, I'm not saying naive and stupid risks. You know, it's not as I was running down the M1 on the hard shoulder at 3 o'clock in the morning, but you've got to be willing to take a risk in your career. Because I've got no problem with anyone who wants to stay in an organization for 20 years. But the reality is your real growth comes from coming outside of that organization and learning from different cultures, different people, experiencing different things, and being able to harness all of that and bring that back into an organization. I also think one of the things that's been a defining moment for me is to lead a group of volunteers, because typically in an executive role, you are leading a group of people who are paid irrespective of whether they do something or not. Whereas a group of volunteers have got the choice of whether they are happy to be led by you, and more importantly, happy to contribute towards the objectives. And I think the work that we have done as a regional board in Yorkshire and the North East has been really, really pivotal in terms of the region, but more so in terms of raising the profile of the CMI brand. And I feel that in my life, and if everything ended for me tomorrow, I would want that to be seen as a big defining moment in my life. Clearly, and I'm not touching on this because it's been mentioned earlier, my mother's not alive to have seen a lot of the things that I've achieved. My mother's been dead for a number of years now, so she never saw her son collect that doctorate at Warwick. She never saw her son achieve becoming a chief exec or a managing director, or all of the things that I've managed to do. But I think my mother lives on through my children. And if I can continue to be that example for them, then that dream and that passion continues. And that's the same thing that I'm espousing in the workplace. We won't get everything right. Nobody gets everything right. But the important thing is, can you look at yourself and say that I did my best? And I think that's something that leaders and organizations and workers in organizations need to spend a lot more time trying to understand, trying to come to terms with, because not everybody can be the CEO. Not everybody can be the finance director. Not everybody can be the shop floor, the factory worker. Everybody's got a role to play in organizations. And I think a lot of those big moments and defining moments in my career and in my life have contributed to some of the things that I'm doing today and really enjoy doing. And it segues nicely into the next section that talks about the future and the next chapter. And you're feeling old when the only conversations you're having is, when can I access my pension? And more importantly, what am I going to do in retirement? And I think what's important for me is, from a legacy perspective, is how do we give back? And part of my work for the last 6.5 years, 7 years with CMI is about the ability to give back. But I think the next excursion of my life is going to be more so about how we give back, and not necessarily on a paid basis, whether you are contributing to an organization as a non-exec, whether you're chairing an organization, etc. And one of the biggest challenges that I've had to overcome spans two strands. I've had to overcome that imposter syndrome. Second generation Jamaican, went to a local comp school, did relatively well and was able to accelerate through college, university, and all of those things. But actually, in 2023, still be working in organizations and serving on boards where I'm the only person that looks like me. And I think one of the things that I've had to overcome is that feeling of, actually, my contribution is just as important. The things that I bring to bear are just as critical as the contribution that others made. And I've served on a number of national recognized organization, the British Library, Joseph Rowntree, YMCA International. I've served on lots and lots of different boards. So what I've done in that regard is use all of those practical and professional skills that I've developed over my career to be able to do that. And I would say to people on this call this evening, it's really important that if you're not getting the opportunity to apply your skills in the place of work where you are now, to look for voluntary and board positions in other organizations that will allow you to do that. It gives you the opportunity to contribute, but it also gives you the opportunity to grow as well. And just before I bring you back in, Carl, one of the things that I've been asked is, what type of people have I most enjoyed working with? And, my working life is probably not as long as it was 20 years ago, but I've really enjoyed working with people who have allowed me to challenge myself. And I've really enjoyed working with people who have challenged me. And I've often been described as challenging, but I've always tried to do that in a positive way, because I feel that you learn more from challenge than you do from comfort. I'd rather go down being challenged than go down knowing I was being comforted. And I think at this point, Carl, I'll let you pick up the rest.
Indeed. Thank you, Delroy. I have to absolutely agree with you. Challenge. I think one of my favorite authors is a guy called Ryan Holiday, who writes about Stoic philosophy. And he says, do one hard thing every day. Challenge yourself, because that's where growth occurs, having a growth mindset. And for anyone listening, I think that's one of the key things I've learned, to remain teachable, to to be a student of the game, to be a student of life, because I have one sort of core principle that everything that everyone has learned, they've learned it, they know it, they've learned it, and I consider myself no less intelligent than everybody else, so therefore I can learn it too. And so remain teachable, read about successful people, read about people in the game. It's there. I think Jim Mattis, who was an well-known American military veteran, said, "If you haven't read any books, then you are functionally illiterate." And it's a great way to personally grow. And for me, the future is about growth. It's about personal growth. It's about challenging myself. Hence the reason why I volunteered and did the work for the CMI. Likewise, Delroy, I have gained so much by giving so much, and I think that's one of the learnings from being a volunteer. You certainly get back 100-fold compared to what you actually give. And the individuals that I've served with on the board challenge me every interaction I have, and it's a wonderful way to grow. And I found myself doing exactly that, Delroy, volunteering where I couldn't get the experience. I actively looked to volunteer. And actively looked for mentors, and I have to say, again, another defining moment for me was actually joining the CMI mentoring scheme and being mentored, and it was a significant relationship I had, because it actually, within that relationship, gave birth to my consultancy, But be under no illusion, and mentoring isn't just a passive relationship. You have to come to it with your whole self and give your whole self. And in turn, because of that such a positive experience that I have had, I've now become a mentor myself on the CMI, and I do mentor somebody in Coventry. And I have been doing for the last three years, and it started in COVID, and we've now moved to face-to-face. And I have to say, even though I'm mentoring, it's reverse mentoring. I get so much back. I get mentored myself. So I would encourage anybody to find a mentor, or if you feel that you can give, then become a mentor yourself. It has lots and lots of benefits for you, and open doors and opportunities for you. But for me now, for the next 5 years, I'm 55, so I'm looking towards 60. I'm not slowing down. I want to develop myself more, and I want to change myself more. So I do put myself to do hard things. So I've just joined Toastmasters. For those that don't know what Toastmasters is, it's an organization that helps you improve your public speaking by actually doing. It's a doing organization. It forces you to get up and speak in front of people. I've just taken I'm just about to retake my advanced driving test. So I keep pushing myself and keep putting myself into opportunities and looking for opportunities for change. And it's only at those points that when you are, as Delroy said, when you push yourself and push the boundaries, and we've all been there, I'm sure, whether it's in the gym, pushing weights, doing reps, or whether it's running, you reach a point where you think, I just can't do this anymore. And it's at that point, when you feel that emotion, that you must say to yourself, no, I'm prepared to go beyond that, push that, and you'll surprise yourself. You will absolutely surprise yourself. You are capable of more. And it's always the case. And it's interesting because I've become sort of aware of the fact that if you hold that emotion of I can't do it anymore, and you keep all that emotion, you don't get the progress. And I've learned that actually you can't have the emotion and you can't have the progress. You can't have both. You've got to give one away. You've got to push through that emotion, to get that development, to get that growth. So for those that are interested, I am a big reader. So my future involves around a book called The 5 a.m. Club, which is written by a guy called Robin Sharma. And for those that are looking for change, I would highly recommend reading The 5 a.m. Club by Robin Sharma. And as the title explains, it's about getting up at 5 a.m. It's about running a routine, creating self-discipline, and cultivating focus, which I think in today's world, in today's technological world with our mobile phones that we seem to be constantly looking at, focus is a key competitive advantage. If you've got that, then you really do have something to compete with, and compete with other people in your field. But I would highly recommend the 5 a.m. Club. I'm trying to change, and I'm trying to use the framework set out by the 5 a.m. Club. And again, you're absolutely right, Delroy. Legacy. I have 2 daughters, and my eldest graduated from Liverpool University last year. Worked in Edinburgh, and actually she surprised my wife and I. In fact, she was a role model for me, because she just announced that she loved the city of Edinburgh, that she would look for a job in Edinburgh, which she did. She secured a job in Edinburgh without myself or my wife pushing. She did it herself. She moved up there and moved her whole life up there and started from scratch, which I am completely in awe of. And she's just a beacon for me. And it's great what your children and the future, the younger future generations can give. Even though, likewise, Delroy, I'm a similar age, we can always learn from the young, and I'm never too proud to learn, particularly technology-wise. But even so, Lauren amazed me, and I'm so proud, and it's a great legacy that my children and my daughter has done that. Similarly, my youngest daughter is studying English language and hopes to become a speech therapist. So she's just about to embark on an MA for 2 years. So again, absolutely applaud that, and I think it's again a great legacy. So yeah, absolutely. So I don't know if there are any live questions yet that we'd like to answer.
Carl, I wonder if I could ask a couple. Just in terms of, I think I know the answers, but what activities give you joy?
Serving people, helping people, give me real joy, and given the experiences I've had in my life, utilizing that experience to, as you say, hand the baton on and draw that ladder down for generations below me. Because particularly in my early career, I didn't have those role models. I didn't have those people to learn from. I learned from my mistakes, and if I can only just help one individual, then that's been a joyous occasion and a joyous thing to do.
I mean, one of the thank you for that, Carl. I mean, one of the activities, I wouldn't even define it as an activity, is to see the next generation coming through. There's nothing that inspires me more than to see young people not just pushing, but hungry to push, to really get on, because it almost speaks to the point that you've just made, that, certainly from my perspective, it's no longer about me, it's about them. and that is something that I take real satisfaction from. But on a personal level, one of the activities that really gives me joy is playing records. So one of my switch offs from work and all the things that we consider work to be is playing vinyl records. So I've got in excess of 20,000 records in my record room, and I really, really enjoy that. And what am I really signaling there? There is an importance of being able to switch off and recharge, because if you just focus on all-out career, you've got no balance. If you've got no balance, your decision-making becomes slightly swayed, because there is nothing else that you're making those. You're clearly using a set of data to make decisions, but quite often people are complex individuals, and sometimes being able to relate to people through non-work related things. I mean, the number of people that I've, once I say to them that I play records, it's like, what do you mean records? What are those? And sort of thing. It kind of suggests to you. But I do want to just really push on and ask the question, how would you describe high performance, Carl?
High performance.
Yeah.
To me, high performance is being the best version of yourself every day. And nobody's perfect. So what that actually means is actually striving to be the best person.
Yeah.
And it's in the striving, it's where the joy lies. It's in the process of trying to become the best version of yourself. Is where the joy is, the process, not the outcome, because we're learning every day. But being the best version of myself, and right in front of me on my desk, and I look at it every day, is a pink card. I'll show it. It's got scribbles on it, but it's got my passion, my mission statement, and my top 5 values. And my passion, it says, each day be the best version of myself in the pursuit of world-class individual performance so I can serve others. And that sums it up. And it's to be truthful to yourself, to be your authentic self.
I mean, my response to that, and I'm mindful that we're going to open it up for the audience. My response to that is performance is not just about things that you say and what you do, but also performance is about how you do things as a collective, because it's that old African proverb, take steps alone or walk miles together in different shoes. And I think unfortunately some parts of the world, and certainly in organizations, I've seen individuals use performance in a negative way, and in a negative way that hurts other people and ultimately then hurts the organization. So in that regard, I think performance is really, really, really important from an individual perspective, but more so from a collective perspective as well. I do know we've got. Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, just to underscore something you said earlier about your vinyl records and the importance of actually downtime. I love, if you look at the word recreation, it's split it in, it's called recreate, and it's so important. And I do listen to music, but I don't listen to records. But my favorite activity, and my wife and daughter pull my leg, is having a bath. I love a long soak in the bath, which is where I do all my thinking. Either that or going for a run. I'm very lucky. I've got a little railway track to run down just outside my house. And I used to wear headphones whilst running, but I don't now. There's something magical going for a run and listening to nature, listening to the birds singing, listening to just nature and the world being at ease with itself, particularly when I go for a run during the summertime at 5 o'clock in the morning.
Okay.
It's very, very, very special about that. and being in nature, which also helps. And also as well, we've just recently been to London, and I think other activities help you with decision making. So, cultural activities, going to an art gallery, going to see a show. There are different things that can spark that inspiration, that can help you sort of formulate or certainly help you think about decisions. So it's not just, as you say, Delroy, work-related activities. Certainly social activities help as well.
Thank you. And as you've been, and thank you for sharing that, I've just been looking at some of the comments in the chat, and someone who's clearly watching on YouTube, Chloe's asked, what would you recommend to someone who's about to graduate and feel that they've lost their way or unsure in the career path they want to follow? Chloe, what I would say in response to that is not uncommon. There are not many students, unless you're doing medicine or law or something like that, and even law, what's got a specific end goal in sight. There's nothing wrong with being unsure. Quite often, your degree is just the start of your career. It doesn't define your career. And one of the things I would say is try and think about what your passion is, Chloe. And it doesn't necessarily have to be something that's related to your degree. And quite often, many graduates, unless you get onto a graduate scheme, and there's lots of organizations that offer graduate schemes, but I always say, try before you buy. Don't be afraid of having 2 or 3 different jobs after university before you actually get to somewhere that actually, this is where I think I want to build my career. But just to assure you, Chloe, that is not an uncommon situation. And actually, it's something that I'm asked quite a lot. And I know that Anna Gomez, who's on YouTube as well, has asked a similar question around which career path to go down. I think, please don't get hung up on this. I think what's important is that you finish your studies with a good degree. And then, even if you're in your final year, start to have conversations with different organizations. Speak to people who work in organizations that you may know, or someone knows someone, and ask the question, how would you feel if I came in for a month, unpaid, worked in those organizations, just to get a sense of feel of what you may or may not wish to do? Because, let me be absolutely clear. When I was 19, I had no idea. And I'm in my mid-50s now, well over my mid-50s. And some would argue that I still have no idea. So that is not something to feel any concern about. I think the one thing I would say, you must start to having conversations with different people and different organizations and think about that. Try before you buy. Now, Danny Penrose has asked a specific question of me. So I'm going to, the importance of switching off. It's really, really important, Danny, because you have to recharge. And if you're not able to switch off, where are you getting the balance? And, whether you train in a gym, Danny, whether you go for a walk in the morning, whether you do swimming, anything that takes you away from the world of work. And I'm not talking about going walking for 10 minutes. I'm talking about doing, a 90-minute walk just to clear your mind. But it's really important that you do that, because actually, Danny, it makes you more productive. So to the second part about feeling guilty, Danny, that's something that you place on yourself. And it's something that you've actually fixed into your mind. And you've got to unfix it in your mind, because I don't believe that anybody's come along and said to you, Danny, you're not thinking about production enough. You're not productive enough. That is something you're punishing yourself for. And the consequence of that, Danny, you can have organizational and career burnout. And actually, that is more dangerous than you feeling that you're not being productive. So I just thought I'd pick a couple of those out.
Darren, on that point, actually, you're absolutely right. Again, from my experience, focus, as I mentioned earlier, is far more important. I think, to do 5 hours of focused work rather than 12 hours of unfocused work is far more productive. So, and is that overused term? Less is definitely more. Definitely, absolutely, and you're absolutely right.
Yeah, and again, not to single you out, Danny, I would say this to anyone on the call: don't be afraid to talk to someone who doesn't work in your organization or your industry about how you're feeling, because you're clearly feeling something emotionally that's making you feel like that. And I know read somewhere on the, I think it's Claire, that's mentioned choose an activity that isn't work related. I think that is really, really important what Claire has said there, because the reality is, and unfortunately, Danny, I've seen it. I've seen where people get to 30, 40, and they're absolutely burned out, Danny, because it was work at all cost and nothing else. And that then spills into your personal life and doesn't allow you to have a life at all. So I do know we had some questions, Natasha, that were sent in prior to the event today. A question from Andrea. I don't know if you want to take that one, Carl.
Yeah, never get to this. Navigating uncertainty. Well, uncertainty is with us. It's being comfortable, or it's being comfortable with being uncomfortable, and that is difficult. But actually, passively avoiding a decision is making a decision, and that's something I've come to realise. That actually, when you don't take a decision, that is a decision. So you can't avoid not making a decision, and I think it's about embracing fear. I think that's, speaking personally, I've been in positions where I've been frightened of making the wrong decision, and through the uncertainty, I don't know whether this is the right decision for me at this point in time. But again, as we've discussed, don't be afraid to experiment. Don't be afraid to look on a chosen decision as an experiment. You can always change if it doesn't work out. And actually, when you look, the benefit of having hindsight, when you look back, you then discover that choice that you thought was a disaster has led you to an opportunity that is great. And actually, you wouldn't have had that opportunity had you not made that choice earlier. Mm-hmm. So try and look at things as an experiment. Everyone slips, trips, and falls. That's just the nature of life. Nobody's perfect. There isn't such a thing as a perfect decision. So I just embrace it and embrace that fear, because the other side of it, there's something special and greater for you.
Yeah, and I think I would just add to that before I take this next question from Rachel. I think confidence. You've got to have the inner confidence to be able to make decisions, because that fear of making a decision will push you into never making a decision at all, and you'll become counterproductive then. And that's when you become a negative influence on an organization. So it's about having the confidence to be able to make that decision, good or bad. You add the confidence to make the decision, and then after a while that confidence should grow. But I did see a question that coming from Rachel, Natasha, in terms of when is the right time to make a leap into the next stage of your career? Well, my response to that is most of mine, believe it or not, have been by accident. because it's usually been as a result of something that's forced me to do something else. But the reality is, your right time might be my worst time. It's what's right for you, Rachel. If you've considered all of the benefits, all of the disadvantages, and you've got the bandwidth to be able to make that leap, or take that next step, I would not say leap, take that next step of your career, and it's a part of your career plan, do it. Because if you don't do it now, you will never do it. And that's one of the things I say to A-level students, MBA students, up-and-coming managers. Don't wait, because if you wait, don't be surprised when someone else takes that opportunity. You've got to have the confidence to be able to stand by the decision you make, especially as part of your career, and do that. Is there any others, Natasha? Just mindful that we've got 5 more minutes. And from Hamid, based on your experience, what is your process for making decisions? Oh my word. I tend to, a lot of things that I do, Hamid, are usually evidence-based. So I'm quite often looking at data. As part of looking at data, I'm looking at information. And actually, part of that is experience as well. So you talk about, especially when there's high consequence that are irreversible. The one thing about being 56, you've got 30 years of experience to look back on. And the other thing that I often do as well is call on my networks. So when I've got a really big decision that will have a really big impact, as well as data and information from inside the organization, I'll reach out to contacts that I have outside of the organization and almost get a second opinion or a different perspective. Because what you can get if you're looking inward only is what I call internal think. And you've got to be able to draw on the experience of others and say, actually, Bob, actually, Elizabeth, when you've done this in the past or something similar, what were the outputs and what were the outcomes? And then use that in order to make those decisions. Carl, I don't know whether you want to add to that.
Yeah, I'd look also at military history. When we're looking at high consequence and irreversible decisions, there's a lot. If you just look in the military section of any bookstore, there's lots and lots of books about military strategy. But what's really interesting, because you can make a decision, you can have a plan. And I draw on my brother's experience, who was in the military. So, for example, in the first Gulf War, the Americans thought they would come into contact with the Iraqis sooner and have stronger defensive lines from the Iraqis. And what happened was the Americans walked through Iraq much quicker, which meant that actually all the supply chain, the fuel for the tanks couldn't keep up, so the tanks had to stop. It's like most things. A plan is a plan until it goes into action. So even though once you've taken the decision, just be prepared that you may have to change that decision because of circumstances and circumstances turning out not the way that you thought they would.
Thanks very much. And I know that Mary's going to come back on screen, but just to Colin McRae, of course, analytical processes are important in decision making. Mary, over to you.
So that's it for today's session. Thank you to our speakers, Delroy and Carl, for your insight and expertise. Please stay tuned to hear more about CMI membership, and thank you for joining us.
Don't forget, as a CMI member, you can find the latest management and leadership insights at managers.org.uk. If you're not yet a member, join our community to discover CMI Confidence with on-demand resources, our network of mentors, and industry-leading accreditations.